Blast off into the cosmos! Welcome to Deep Cosmos, your source for space news and global breaking updates. Subscribe if you're new. Let's dive into the video now. On August 1st, 2025, President Donald Trump reignited U.S. Canada trade tensions by signing an executive order raising tariffs on select Canadian goods from 25% to 35%. The move targeted products outside the USMCA's protection, signaling a sharp escalation in the ongoing dispute. The White House cited two reasons: Canada's alleged failure to curb fentanyl smuggling into the U.S., and its retaliatory tariffs on American steel and aluminum. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer claimed the hike was necessary to uphold American trade enforcement. The administration framed the tariffs as both a national security measure and a defense of U.S. economic interests. The U.S. would act unilaterally if talks broke down. For Canadian industries like steel and aluminum already battered by previous tariffs, the new measures threatened jobs and exports. American consumers, too, faced the prospect of higher prices for affected goods. The announcement injected fresh uncertainty into cross-border business, turning a policy dispute into a kitchen table issue for families and workers on both sides. The 35% tariff became a symbol of deepening divisions, transforming a trade disagreement into a full-blown economic confrontation. The U.S. Canada partnership, once a model of cooperation, now faced its most serious test in decades. Canada immediately rejected the White House's justification for the new tariffs, calling the fentanyl accusation baseless. Canadian officials cited U.S. law enforcement data showing less than 1% of seized fentanyl originated from Canada. They argued that using the opioid crisis as a pretext for trade penalties was both inaccurate and inappropriate. Canada highlighted its $1.3 billion investment in border security, including advanced surveillance and enforcement technology. The message: Canada is a reliable partner, not lax on enforcement. Business leaders echoed this, with Canadian Chamber of Commerce CEO Candice Lang calling the move factless tariff turbulence. Industries warned that unpredictable U.S. actions were damaging supply chains and investment on both sides. Canada's response was unified and evidence-based, defending its record and reputation. The government made clear it would not accept punitive measures based on false claims. This strong pushback set the stage for a prolonged standoff, with Canada refusing to yield to U.S. pressure. The tariff hike followed the collapse of high-stakes talks in Washington, D.C. Canada's Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc led a delegation seeking compromise, but negotiations broke down over a core issue. The U.S. demanded Canada drop its retaliatory tariffs on American steel and aluminum before any progress. Canada refused, insisting its counter-tariffs were a legitimate response to earlier U.S. duties. LeBlanc argued that removing Canadian tariffs while U.S. ones remained would leave Canadian industries exposed. Canada pushed for a mutual rollback, but the U.S. wanted a unilateral concession. This deadlock created an unbridgeable gap, with neither side willing to move first. The breakdown highlighted eroded trust and a shift from cooperation to confrontation. For Canada, standing firm was about economic sovereignty and national interest. The failed talks weren't just about tariffs. They revealed a deeper clash of political wills. Both sides dug in, preparing for a drawn-out conflict. The diplomatic impasse signaled a new, more adversarial era in U.S.-Canada relations. In response to the tariff hike, Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed Canadians with resolve, vowing to defend the nation's sovereignty and economic independence. Carney called for a reset in the U.S.-Canada relationship, blaming Trump's aggressive strategy for disrupting decades of cooperation. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc reiterated that Canada had negotiated in good faith but would not accept a one-sided deal. He emphasized that protecting Canada's steel and aluminum sectors was a matter of national security. The government confirmed its 25% counter-tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum would remain in place. This dollar-for-dollar retaliation aimed to pressure U.S. industries and show Canada would not be bullied. The leadership's unified message: Canada is prepared to absorb economic pain to defend its interests. Carney's call for a relationship reset signaled a long-term, principled approach. Ottawa's defiance rallied public support and warned the U.S. not to underestimate Canadian resolve. While the 35% tariff sounds severe, most Canadian exports to the U.S. are shielded by the USMCA. The Bank of Canada estimates up to 95% of Canadian goods could qualify for exemptions. For many sectors, business continues as usual, but the targeted industries, especially steel and aluminum, face real pain. These sectors, already hit by previous U.S. tariffs, now struggle to compete in their largest market. Jobs and communities in Canada's industrial heartland are at risk. Some auto parts and vehicles not meeting USMCA rules are also vulnerable, disrupting North American supply chains. The result: logistical headaches and higher costs for manufacturers and consumers. American companies relying on Canadian inputs now face higher prices, making their products less competitive. Canada's retaliatory tariffs hit U.S. exporters in return, spreading the pain. The trade war's impact is a two-way street, hurting workers and businesses on both sides. Tariffs, intended as protection, often end up as blunt instruments with far-reaching consequences. The uncertainty deters investment and threatens the stability of the integrated North American economy. The tariff conflict comes amid major political change in Canada. After Justin Trudeau's resignation, Mark Carney became Prime Minister, winning on a promise to stand firm against U.S. pressure. Carney's tougher approach reflects a shift in Canadian public sentiment after years of trade disputes. Unlike other U.S. allies, Canada responded to Trump's tariffs with direct retaliation, leaving it isolated but resolute. Former officials note Canada stands alone in a tit-for-tat battle with its powerful neighbor. This bold stance carries risks, but Carney's mandate is clear: defend Canadian interests, even if it means standing alone. The government frames its actions as principled, defending both national interests and the rules-based trading order. The challenge: balancing strength with the economic fallout and seeking support from sympathetic international partners. Canada's new leadership and solitary position define the current standoff, making the stakes higher than ever. As political and economic battles rage, the legality of Trump's tariffs faces a major challenge in U.S. courts. A federal appeals court is reviewing whether the president overstepped his authority by imposing the 35% tariff. Plaintiffs argue that only Congress can regulate commerce and that national security laws are being misused. A court victory could invalidate the tariffs and limit presidential power over trade. For Canada, a legal win would vindicate its position without requiring concessions. However, the judicial process is slow and uncertain, with no guarantee of success. The courts offer hope for resolution, but diplomatic engagement remains essential. The legal battle is just one front in the broader struggle to end the tariff dispute. With talks stalled, Canada is shifting focus inward to protect its economy. The government is providing direct support to industries and workers hit hardest by U.S. tariffs, including financial aid and job programs. At the same time, Canada is fast-tracking major infrastructure and energy projects to boost economic resilience. The goal: reduce dependence on the U.S. market and diversify trade relationships. This dual strategy, immediate support and long-term investment, aims to weather the current storm and build a stronger future. Diplomatic channels remain open, but Canada is preparing for a prolonged dispute. The pivot signals a pragmatic adaptation to new realities, prioritizing national self-reliance. Canada is determined to control its own economic destiny, regardless of U.S. policy shifts. As summer 2025 unfolds, the future of Canada-U.S. relations remains uncertain. Despite public posturing, communication channels are open, offering hope for a breakthrough. Direct talks between Prime Minister Carney and President Trump could restart negotiations. The main obstacle: whether Canada must drop its retaliatory tariffs first. A creative compromise, like a phased rollback, may be needed for progress. Meanwhile, the legal challenge in U.S. courts continues, but its outcome is far from certain. Canada is also strengthening ties with Europe and Asia to reduce reliance on the U.S. The best-case scenario is a swift diplomatic resolution. The worst is a deepening trade war. Most likely, tensions will persist as legal and diplomatic efforts play out. Two nations bound by history and economics now face a crossroads. The health of their vital partnership hangs in the balance.